Right, I just want to make a little film going through my archive. So every batch I retain one can, and this is batch 1 back in April 23. I don't know if you can kind of see the reflection of whether there's any distortion or deformation. I mean, all of these over here were, all of the cans have been tested and are sterility safe. Batch 2. Batch 3. Batch 4. Now, I think this did have a problem batch. Yeah, this was a problem batch, that one. So there's a lot of shaking in that one. Batch 5. Now, these ones here were created for the product, well, for the launch of the canning company, really, for Rock Oyster Festival 2023. This is an example of like a worst case scenario. I had to hold the oysters in the fridge for 40 hours due to an equipment failure. So quite a bit of distortion, quite a bit of buckling or peaking, which I had this batch tested and it was all sterility fine. But you know, that is a bit of an excessive movement. Now, this is where I started to fill. So all the previous ones were 125 net weight. This is when I started to fill to 110, and yeah, that meant there was a lot more headspace, air in the top of the can. You can kind of hear it rattling. Quite a bit of deformation or distortion on those ones, and I think this was the first can that came back as a query, or the first batch. This was a batch I produced, and the customer came back saying there's a lot of flex in this, which kind of started the investigations back in April 2024. You know, I mean, I wasn't aware of flipper or peaking or buckling as a term, and in my critical control points after production, I send them off for testing, and this also shows that it had lost 3 grams, you know, which could be in the handling and everything else, but it could be a problem with the seam, so that it's pushing some of the contents out. 108, 104. I mean, I don't see any issues with the seams, but there's a bit sort of sharp on those. But to be honest, you know, all of these, I mean, this has got Port Health Authority, so I think this is the batch. Yeah, it must be the batch that Port Health had a new inspector, and he came and visited me for a day, and this is the batch he helped produce and witnessed. And at the end of it, he said, well, it's not bacteria causing the distortion because it's only just come out of the retort, the cooker, the sterilising phase. I went off and did some investigations. I had to go to Barcelona to the manufacturer of the retorts to see if we could do some modelling and come up with some different pressures. And it was kind of suggested by the inspector we need less pressure. And then I also found some cans in Portugal that showed similar signs from 2 different manufacturers. There were several products in a similar kind of can that had this flex, which is ultimately what Paul's not happy with. You can see here there's a kink right by this corner, this recess, and the reason the recess is there and on both sides is because the ring pull snugs up to the edge of the countersink, so it has to to allow it to stack both ways. But concluded that really there's no compromise to the seam integrity that he was worried about, and there's no sterility risk. I actually put this in the archive because it did seem to have a little dent right on the easy open part. So we went on, we made loads of product, and I hired a chef, and we were preparing for Rock Oyster Festival 2024, where I was hoping to launch the tinned fish range. So we did chowder, we did hake, haddock, mackerel, and sardines, or pilchards as we call them down here, and then carried on, made loads of batches. So the rock oysters and the rope grown mussels were sent to Taste of the West, and they both won gold, which was fantastic, and was just about to sort of massively up production with the guy that I'd hired. Yeah, here's some mackerel. I mean, you know, there is flex, but some of the ingredients are olive oil, some are elderflower and ginger, some are in the liquor from shucking. That clicking noise is just the ring tapping back on the, but it does flex, definitely. You know, it does show signs of deformation. But again, everything's been tested. I do 84 cans in a batch. If one goes off for testing, there's quite a high percentage of testing compared to, you know, the bigger manufacturers. If they're producing 300,000 cans a day, they don't do 1%. You know, it'd be 3,000 cans. Well, no, 30,000 cans. But this was the flex that Paul really had a problem with. And so just before the Rock Oyster Festival, he issued a remedial action notice which prevented me from selling any cans. I also did a recall on the cans that had gone to stockists, and they were just as disappointed as I was. But you know, it was impossible to then recall the cans that they had sold to a customer that walked in the shop. I think I did the recall as a precautionary measure. You know, this has got a bit of scuffing on the top of the can from the seaming machine, but you know, it seems cosmetic. It's just that printed part of it. But it was about this time that he really you know, caved in and issued a remedial action notice, which prevented me from selling any cans with distortion. And it also said you cannot sell any cans from any batch when one has distortion, which I think is incredibly unfair. That was it. So kind of off I went, and had to go to Barcelona again and did some more modelling with the guys over there, and we added pressure rather than reducing it. And I came back and had a new program, and this was the sort of first batch of tuna. Now you can see a lot less distortion, but it does move. And this can he accepted. So, you know, the difference between this one and this one, you know, it's much more solid. I give you that. But this is mussels in elderflower and ginger. This is a tuna steak with water. And the other difference, so we changed some of the cooling programs. I added a pad to the top of the chuck so that it pushed down a little bit on the tin, on the lid, whilst the seaming was happening. And I also changed the fill weight to 130 in total. The can manufacturer design spec had a guide of 125mm plus or minus 5. So the 110 fills were probably wrong to do, but Camden insisted headspace was critical, so I wasn't concerned. But anyway, this is the can that I produced and enabled the inspector to be satisfied and lift the RAN notice in November. So he saw that previous batch and this batch and was happy, and he sent some off for testing, and he actually lifted the ban on the 7th of November. So, you know, off we went, produced all the cans of tuna during November, and these are all pretty solid. You know, I give him that. There is a difference to it. You know, that's got a bit of flex, but you know, I asked him to come along. He saw all 11 batches of tuna. They weren't all full batches, because just as I was working my way through them, you know, I'd get to half a batch and have to just cook that one. But so, you know, all of these still have a bit of flex, but he was satisfied. And it was great because it meant I could sell these cans, but he was not happy about selling any of the other cans, even though they've been incubation tested, which is 14 days at 37 degrees in an incubation cabinet, constant temperature, and then tested over 48 hours. And I came back in January, cracked on with doing some Pilchards, and this was the first batch of Pilchards. So it's a different product. Tuna was 100 grams of meat, like a whole steak, and 30 grams of water, and this was 100 grams of Pilchards or sardines fillets in oil, up to 130. And as soon as I got these out of the cooker, I was like, oh, here we go again. What's Paul going to think of these? And when he came and visited, he did have a problem with this one. You can see the slight dent again in the corner. Now this happens when there's more than 3 psig pressure inside the can compared to in the chamber. So I did a program change again. I added a lot more counter pressure, and you know, this can is like the tuna. I don't, you know, there is a bit of distortion, but nothing much. No more than the tuna that he accepted. But you know, he still wasn't happy, and he said I have to stick to program 9, which didn't work for the Pilchards. So I can't be restricted to just using one program. I have to work, you know, it might be that every different product has a different program because it has different ingredients. But this is where it all, you know, this is where it stands right now. So these are the cans which he is about to issue another remedial action notice on, to prevent me from selling these cans. This was, so the last 4 batches of Pilchards were in sunflower oil, and this was a bit of a trial. I did sort of half a batch in Tabasco sweet and sour sauce, and you can kind of see that the sweet and sour sauce is much more solid than the oil. So, you know, water, oil, Tabasco, sweet and sour, like viscous sauce, all have different consistencies, and you know, there is going to be a change to the cans or the product because there's different ingredients inside. They're identical cans, seamed on the same machine, and you know, cooked on various programs, but you know, I've got the ability to have 50 different programs, and I suspect there will be some changes to each product, but there you go. So don't know what to do now.